that we can go over, and I'm all is well so far, but I have a new laptop because my old one, the sound was awful. So I think all is well. I did a few check-ins in a Zoom call earlier today, so I think we're good. How was your week this week?
It went well. I feel like I'm understanding what to do now, like I'm starting to gel a little bit, and like it was fun.
Yeah.
It was, like choosing food was fun, and
Yes.
yeah, it was pretty cool. I'm enjoying this a lot.
I think it takes a few weeks for sure just to get into the grind of like all the information, new macros and what those look like and how those fit. It's often a puzzle piece of like getting them to work. And once they work, you're like, okay, I get it. And like, then you can have fun. And that's just not like your boring single ingredient food. Once you get comfortable in tracking and cooking and stuff like that, you can kind of do a little bit more, when it comes to food variety, which I think is fun. And then it's just like a little less mental bandwidth and, and trying to get close to those markers. So, what about a win for the week?
So I hit my protein goals two days in a row.
Yes. Because I know that was hard for you, is getting it up there. So that's awesome. Yeah. And how did you do that? What did you do to like hit those? Did you just add more meat or what? Like,
so I did a little bit of all of the stuff that we talked about on our call last week. Like I went and got the Oikos, the total, the Greek yogurt with the extra protein added into it. I got the Catalina Crunch. I got all the things. It's really good. Yeah. My kids are like, can I try this? And I'm like a little.
This is mommy's treat. My husband calls it a gravel because it's very loud when you chew it. But I was like, whatever.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of mouth things happening, and it's good. You need crunch because like everything else is cottage cheese or yogurt or like deli meat or something. Everything's slimy and squishy, so it's nice to have something crunchy. But
speaking of crunchy, also, have you ever heard of flex chips?
I have not. Flex chips. I gotta write this down.
So sometimes my Target carries them, not everybody's, but I know you can get them like Target online. My Aldi sometimes has them in like the my watch is going off, in like their random specialty aisle. I don't know if you have an Aldi or if you're an Aldi shopper, but the barbecue ones, so they have barbecue, they have buffalo, and there's a cheddar. I don't love the other two, but the barbecue ones are awesome because you get that like sweet, salty, and you get a crunch. So it's like eating a chip, but it's like 26 chips. And it's like 120 calories and maybe 15 grams. I like them better than like the Quest chips, honestly, because the Quest chips leave a weird taste in my mouth afterwards. Like, it's cool to like toss them in things for crunch, like on top of like a taco bowl or something like that. But the barbecue flex chips are very good.
Okay, and cool.
If I'm gonna have like a wrap, like, like when I have a sandwich, I want something crunchy to go along with it. So I'll often do those or like almond crackers. But these flex chips actually have like a decent amount of protein.
Okay, cool. I had tried those Quest chips and like you said, they're a little weird. They're good.
Yeah.
But like they're not great.
And like I feel like they taste really good, but for me, it's that like aftertaste. And after I've eaten, like after I've gotten through like most of the bags, the texture, how they break down, you're like, okay, like this is like, and then I get that like whey protein taste in my mouth, like after it, which I don't love. So flex chips, those were a recommendation by one of my other coaches. And I was like walking through my Aldi and I was like, oh, well, there they are. And then I went back and bought like 3 bags of them because I was like, I've never seen them before. And I think on Amazon, they're a little bit more expensive. Okay. So just something, but that's a huge win. That's awesome to be able to like get little snackies, and like a lot of the time just adding a little bit more volume to your meat helps. But sometimes, like you said, you just don't want to be eating like a ton of meat. You want some variety, so I think that is definitely helpful.
Yeah, because I find like I'm eating steak and I'm like, oh, 6 ounces. Oh wait, no, I need 10 ounces of steak. And like 10 ounces of steak is a huge amount of meat. So like I don't want to do that in a meal. So yeah, it's been getting this variety, adding in these things that we had talked about on our call last week was really helpful. And finally I'm like, okay, working those puzzle pieces, putting them together and able to find a balance. And it's fun.
Good. Very good. Yeah. I often find like that most people don't have problem with like hitting carbs or in and around there, it's protein. Just because if you're not used to eating that much meat, it can get very difficult to hit numbers, especially when they start to increase, if your protein starts to increase. So that is super helpful. My win for the week, I feel like I'm like one of my clients where they're like, I'm struggling to find a win for this week. Because it's been like, I sat down, my husband came home and I'm like, I am unsure what day of the week we're on. It's Wednesday. But yes, okay. So when I have all summer, my one daughter is not a summer birthday. She's in May 1st of anything. So I often like her birthday creeps up on me because I'm like, oh, everybody else is July. My two girls are a week apart, and then my oldest just turned 11 yesterday. So it was fun to celebrate her. So I feel like the last week or two, I've kind of had to like shift my mindset to be like, okay, workouts are probably going to take a back seat. We're super busy. And this week too, we've done a lot of fun things for birthdays and stuff like that. And I'm like, I just know once kids get back into school, I'm going to get back at it. It'll be fine. So I guess that's a win too, because my old self, when this stuff starts to happen, and I'm sure like most people can relate, when I get into like a week or two where my workouts have been really inconsistent, I can like get in effort mode. Like I'm like, well, I've already, I've only gotten one workout in this week so far, and last week I only got in 3. So like, I'm just gonna screw it. And either I'm gonna overeat, or it gives me an excuse to like keep being super inconsistent, where now I know like this is a season, whatever that looks like. I know it's like we're right at the end where I'm not wishing away summer, but like school, we're going to get some structure. So I know that my workouts are going to be fine. I know now that I'm not going to gain fat in 2 weeks because I haven't done all my workouts. I'm like pretty consistent with my food, but I had a piece of cake last night and I had a piece of cake tonight. So it's like, these are little things that don't really affect, like, I know in the grand scheme of things now, when I weigh myself in the morning, like, I'm like, okay, yeah, like that makes sense. Like, and it's not like it was up crazy or anything like that, but it's like these last 2 weeks or a couple weeks have just been like enjoying. And like I said, so it's a win. My old self would have been like, well, it's just a downward spiral from here. And why not? Because I'm already here. Whereas I know like there isn't much lost here, if that makes sense. So it's kind of cool to have that shift in mentality. So.
And that you gave yourself space to celebrate.
Yeah. And like,
yourself.
I never want my like kids to be like, oh, well, mom's not going to eat a piece of cake because, she's on a diet or whatever. So it's like, they're able to see me enjoy things. And it is really cool. I will mention like, and we all know this, our kids are sponges. And I feel like Angie and Paul always say like, do as they see you do, not what you say, or something, whatever that saying is your kids watch you, rather than like really listening.
Right.
My oldest daughter a week or two ago was asking me about nutrition. And it's just funny. And it wasn't anything like, oh, mom, I think I'm this, or I think I'm that. She's like, she enjoys running. And even though she's 11, she's super competitive. And she's like, well, how do I get to be like a stronger athlete? And I said, I'm like, you have to put fuel in your body. Like, this is why mommy eats the way she does. I'm not on a diet. This is just food I enjoy. I work in things that I truly love. I'm not going to tell you sugar's bad. I'm not going to tell you this is bad. And she was like, okay. She's like, I feel like I can do that. And I'm like, really? And, I'm like, it was just cool to have that conversation. It was a really safe conversation. I have all girls. So I always worry about like, I never want to, like point out or mention things that like, oh, you can't have that because they're going to see what I do and hopefully learn and take that. But it was just cool to see that she was like watching. And the other day we were swimming yesterday and the girls were like, oh, your workouts are working. You got abs. And I was like, thank you. Like,
yeah,
it's just like cool to see them point it out and know that I like work really hard because I want my body to be healthy. I'm like, I always tell them, I'm like, I want to be here. I want to do all I can to be here for you guys as long as possible. And that means like creating this space to be healthy, mind, body, and soul. So it was really cool to see. And just, the fact that like kids notice. So
yeah, and that you get to be this better version of yourself now, that you get to come to them as an amazing role model and share with them tips, and that maybe they're not going to have to struggle the way you did.
Yeah, and if there are any struggles, because it's like I can tell, because like obviously they have four I mean, they're young, but four different body styles. And it's like learning to love who you are, what you are, and what you have. And like, if you're putting good foods and fuels and stuff like that in your body, then great. Like, I never want it to be like, yeah, you have to like restrict and not eat that, and like that's bad. So there's a fine line obviously there with them, so it's cool.
That is really cool. I love that.
Okay, let's get to what did you have? I'll start with any of your questions. Did you have any questions? I feel like I did. The wrist pain. Did you get wristbands?
I didn't buy them yet. I was waiting to see if you had mentioned, or somebody had mentioned, that they were going to ask Paul and Angie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Paul is like, oh, I often see people with a lot of wrist pain. And I was like, really? Because I know for me too, I reached out to my, so Tony does my workout program, and I remember, and he's like, I can give you, because another coach and I talked about it, because she's like, he gave me like wrist stabilizing workouts, like that could help to strengthen your grip strength. But it is true when you start to go, and I noticed too when I use a bar for like bench press, if I am not conscious about keeping my elbows neutral, if they end up rolling back like that, that's when I notice like wrist pain here, and mine sometimes goes up into my forearm. So it's just being really mindful if you're doing any kind of pressing, that your wrists don't end, because it's really easy for a bar too for them just to start to tip back. So I would be very mindful about, bench press, if you have your dumbbells, that nothing is turning. And so, because I feel it too when I often, and I don't know, maybe if I tweak something, because tendonitis is also a thing. When I was working on my chin-ups, when I pull up, my wrists do that, because I'm trying to get my whole body weight up. So and I should ask, he wrote me back about he skipped over like actually using, like, let me message him again, because there was a question about weight gain with like heavy lifts, if that's possible. So he mentioned, he did speak through that, but when him and I talked wrist pain, he didn't mention his recommendation on if using like wrist those braces, if that would help. But I truly think they would, because it will help to keep them neutral.
Right.
But let me make a note to do that right when we get off, because he's pretty good about but Paul just told me when I was asking, I'm like, I feel like it's from my pull-ups, because my bar is straight. I don't have like the two things that come out, like my old gym would have those. So it was easier to pull up like that, because there's no way to like move your wrists there. They stay neutral because you're hanging. But now I have to do this way. I mean, this way is really like a pull-up is obviously more difficult. I don't know why. So I stopped trying to do those with my own body weight, because I felt like I was hurting my wrists.
Yeah.
So let me ask Tony about the wrist grips.
Yeah, I'm never sure if a brace is sometimes bad because your body doesn't build up the muscle then to support it.
And I already feel like I know what he's gonna say. I feel like he's gonna say work on like stabilizing your wrist first, and maybe grip strength. So I will also ask him for exercises for that, because I think he gave another coach some of those exercises. So wrist grip strength and exercises.
Yeah, that'd be super great. I've been doing a lot of the stretching of my fingers, and because I'm getting the pain through my palm, all through my forearm, like
palm and forearm. Okay.
Yeah, palm and forearm. Yeah, and like the meat here in my thumb area.
Oh, when I do
really sore.
Sometimes when I do push-ups, I often feel like hurt and strain through there too, but I don't know if and sometimes when I change like where my hands are, that'll help. But I see you, because I feel like, again, I often find that I do get some wrist pain. But I am very conscious now to try and keep my wrists neutral when I'm doing any kind of pushing. So
Okay, cool.
I will ask him about that, and specifically in, in the wrist palm form pain. Okay. And then I'll kind of circle what he said, because I think somebody asked, I can't remember who it was, asked about, she was starting to do some heavier lifts and she noticed her weight spike. And what is the science behind that? So Tony did say, he's like, if you are consistently doing heavy lifts and like really like in a muscle gain phase, he's like, yes, this obviously happens because you're building muscle weighs more than fat. But if it's like a comparison to like, oh, today I just did a really like, I upped my weight in leg day, it's more than likely the weight gain is probably more from a different variable, whether that's water, holding water. Because obviously we see now, because we're weighing ourselves daily, the fluctuations happen. It all comes out in the wash at the end of the week.
Yeah.
Those little spikes, there are days sometimes where I was like, oh, I'm gonna get on the scale, I'm gonna be down a half pound because I was on it yesterday. And I'm like, what just happened? But I know too, it's like once it comes out in the wash at the end of the week, it's not really that big of a deal, but I get it. Like there are days where you're like, I have no clue what's happening with the female body. Like, and again, I would be so interested to see what a man does weekly. And I should ask Paul that, like, do they fluctuate like women do? I would doubt it. I should ask my husband if he weighs himself every day. I'm gonna write that down because I feel like I was gonna do that. I'm gonna do my own little, but he doesn't watch what he eats or anything like that. So that could be interesting. So, he said that there's probably with what we're doing now, he did say body composition could absolutely change. And I think that's why I know that's why we have women take their measurements, pictures, measurements, and weight daily, because, well, not the pictures and measurements, but why we have those taken weekly is because things can stay, like weight can stay the same for some people. And I know it's frustrating, they're doing all the things and it's like, I'm only dropping like a quarter of a pound or what that looks like. And we're like, okay, we'll take your measurements. And they're like 99% of the time they'll be like, dang, I lost, when you add it all up, I lost 15 inches in the last 4 weeks. And I think that's what is huge. And he said sometimes when you are starting to like, because I don't know, I should look at your works, you guys workouts. Usually they change every 4 weeks. And obviously, you're going to be wanting to add more volume. Like that's why we like to write things down. So you're adding more volume, every week, every other week, whatever that looks like, if you can. And those heavier lifts will change body composition, obviously. So, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to affect our weight significantly. Like, if you're like, oh, I did a really heavy lift day, and that's probably why my weight goes up the next day, it's probably a different variable. So that was one of the questions, which I thought was interesting too, because I don't know. And I thought, and I should elaborate with him, because there are days where I remember this more when I would do like HIIT workouts, I would be starving after like a HIIT workout and but I'm like, oh, but I just did a workout. So I'm going to eat a little bit more. So sometimes I feel like that happens too, when you like get a really heavy lift in and you're like, I feel good, I'm feeling strong, but I'm feeling very hungry. And I always would tell myself, well, you worked out really hard, so you deserve a little bit extra, or whatever that looks like. So I think there's a lot of variables there. But it was a great question. So we talked about that already. So, there was also a question, and I want to talk a little bit about accuracy and tracking while you're out, while you're on vacation, or while you're sick. Because there have been, I feel like, multiple people who've had like flu and stuff like that. And they're like, I ate a bunch of crackers and pasta, so I didn't like track at all, which is totally fine. I feel like if you're not feeling well and you need to eat crackers, you eat those crackers. If you want to later track them, I feel like a lot of these things for me, and I think eventually for you, once you guys really learn to look at the data and look at what's happening, I would try my best to track it. It's one thing if you guys are like so sick that like you're like, I'm in bed, and I don't even remember what I ate. But like if you are going out to dinner, like I'm here to help you. will help look at a menu. I will walk you through if you're like, okay, this is the plan. I want to have 2 or 3 drinks. Like, what should I eat? Like, what would fit my macros best? Like, instead of just going out and being like, we always call it the case of the efforts. Paul will say the word. I'm like, I'm not gonna say the word, but it's just easier to do your best to track, just because it keeps you consistent in actually tracking. Because I feel like once you get a night or 2 or whatever that looks like of like, oh, well, I'm going out to eat, so I don't know how to track it, so I'm just not going to do it. I think we're creating habits here. And I think it also creates a habit of like, well, I'm not going to do it when it gets hard, or like, I don't know how to do it. That's what I'm here for. I will absolutely help you. You can be like, Elena, this is what I ate. Can you help me find stuff that are, that's close enough? But I would rather see you track what you might consider a really bad day, or like you underate because you were sick, because you just had crackers and pasta. Log it. I mean, obviously, there are days where you can choose. You're like, I just can't. Sure. Like, we're all adults here. That is your decision. But I feel like for me, and most times when I do it, I just do my best and I'll track it and I'll be like, well, yeah, if I went out to dinner and I decided to eat, chips and guac, and I didn't have it logged before I went, like, it is what it is. Like, I make that decision. I'm an adult and I log it. And that way I can see I went out to dinner, like, instead of 1,400 calories, I ate 17 or 18, and you just kind of move on. So I just think there's something with just keeping on course with tracking, instead of, especially in the very beginning, because I know it's hard. But if you create these habits where you're like, okay, this is easy, even if I have to look a little bit, whether that's while you're sitting out at dinner. I mean, sometimes I do it in front of my husband and I'm like, oh, well, let me track, or try to track what we're going to eat really quick. Or whether I do it when I get home and I just do my best. I would rather see that than an empty day, because again, I feel like it's going to create these tendencies where you're like, I'm just going to track it, and again, if you're out and Voxer me, just be like, hey, or not, you guys don't Voxer, but you guys can message me, or my other clients Voxer me, and just be like, send me a message. I don't care if it's a side message or on the bronze group, but honestly, I would send it through the bronze because people probably could benefit from it, and just be like, look, I had 2 drinks, I had 2 margaritas, I have no clue how to log it, and I had X, Y, and Z, and I'll be like, okay, let's figure out how to log this. And I would even jump on a Zoom call and walk you through it, because I feel like it gets really important. I think once you can get past being social and tracking, and like, it's not a thing anymore. Obviously, you don't have to weigh it. Like, I mean, you can bring a scale to a party if you want to.
Lose you.
Oh, did you
Oh
lose me?
no.
Am I frozen? I think we're frozen. Hello?